Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners, to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius, the official energy drink of PewterReport.com. It is a Thursday edition of the show as we continue to get through this Tampa Bay Buccaneers bye week, as they have no game on Sunday or at any point this week. So we have a little bit of leeway, a little bit of flexibility with what we want to talk about. So Thursday's show is all about the Bucs' biggest needs moving forward. We'll talk about positions that are necessary, that need to play better down the stretch, and positions that will be replaced, looked at, drafted at, all of that good stuff for the offseason as well. So we'll break that down, get into a couple of other Bucs topics as well, and of course, get to a good amount of comments and super chats as well from you, the Pewter people. So let's get into it. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me is my fellow colleague from PewterReport.com and my Thursday co-host, Adam Stefan. Adam, how are you enjoying this Bucs bye week?
Matt, I am enjoying the little break with the bye week and kind of the time off, kind of like the Bucs are resetting, and we get a chance to kind of do the same. I'm really excited about today's show, though, because it's a couple weeks in the making. Back in late October, did a couple stories about some way too early team needs. And as you look at the Buccaneers kind of down the stretch, that those team needs have really grown, and you've kind of seen how profound they are. So looking down the stretch for the rest of the season, like you mentioned, there are a few positions that need to play better. And then going into next year, how they play will really affect the team as a whole.
Yeah, you did a couple of that. You also had a Bucs 2025 mock draft for the bye week that we'll talk about a little bit later on the show. So plenty of positions to talk about. Some are a little more obvious than others. We understand that for sure. But, I think it's important to address a little bit of everything. Before we get into that, this week, Scott and I have talked a lot about, what's going to take place after the bye. Are the Bucs still in playoff contention? Could they even win the NFC South in some crazy fashion if the Falcons are to collapse? So, Adam, just tell us, myself, the Pewter people, what's your optimism level? What's your optimism range, kind of looking at what Tampa Bay has in front of them coming after the bye?
Yeah, if I had to rate my optimism maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say probably like an 8, 8.5.
Wow,
I'm pretty optimistic about the team heading down this final stretch just because of the opponents they're facing, Matt. I mean, over the past few weeks, they've had really close, tough losses to the Chiefs and 49ers. But throughout the season, they've shown they can at least stay in the ball game against the top teams. Back in week 2, they even beat the Lions in Detroit. That was kind of like their statement win. I know when you and Scott went over like the midseason awards, that was the biggest win. But when you look at the Giants, the Panthers, the Raiders, those teams and the quarterbacks they're facing, it's a great opportunity for Todd Bowles and his defense to really get back on track and at least show that they can improve, that they're not a defense that will give up 30 points every single game. So with that and the fact that the offense has kind of hung in there, what the team really needs to do is get healthy, obviously.
Yeah.
But Mike Evans, Jamel Dean, they're going to be back relatively soon. So there is optimism. There is hope. And that was kind of what we talked about in the roundtable this week, that they can turn it around. And so I think that in this case, I believe that they will.
That's the silver lining in all of it, is one, the schedule and the opponents that they have coming up. But two, and probably even more importantly, is Mike Evans returning and Jamel Dean returning. Because arguably two of the biggest issues right now for the Bucs, defensively, there's a mishmash of issues, but one of the biggest ones that we've especially seen last week, and I can't help but think, if Zion and Jamel Dean are healthy for that last drive against the 49ers, does that game get into overtime instead of them losing it in regulation? And I don't know. I can't help but think, with the way that the Bucs have lost in OT, those other two games against the Falcons and the Chiefs, the law of averages had to say that the Bucs are going to get the ball in overtime, just based on the coin toss and the way that things have gone. But, you can't get into overtime if that doesn't happen in the first place. So I think that's super important, because the Bucs are going to be a favorite in pretty much every single game down the stretch, even as bad as they've been, with the exception of the Chargers game, because that also takes place in Los Angeles, so it's West Coast, and the Chargers have a pretty good record. but they need something extra at wide receiver, because to say it's been pedestrian what they've gotten from the wide receiver room is an understatement. And we knew it was going to be an uphill battle, but I don't even think we expected what we've seen from Sterling Shepard, Rakim Jarrett, Ryan Miller, the whole Jalen McMillan saga, and so on
Yeah.
and so forth. So something really has to give at that point. So optimism, yes, for sure. You said you gave it an 8. Let me ask you this, though. What about the Bucs actually making the playoffs? Because I think that's a little bit different between being successful down the stretch and making the postseason, because you're not just dealing with the Bucs themselves, you're also dealing with the rest of the NFC. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great point. So while you could be optimistic at like looking at the record and being like, oh, they got a very favorable schedule, making the playoffs is a whole other ball game. And when you look at the team, I mean, if they finish 6-1 down the stretch, you're looking at a 10-win season. But will that even be good enough to make the playoffs, Matt? When you look at how stacked the NFC North is, although the Vikings have kind of tapered off a little bit, the Bears with Caleb Williams, it's looking so. I mean, the Bucs' chances at making the wild card, the NFC West is really stacked with the Cardinals, the Rams,
Yeah.
the Seahawks, the 49ers, all looking to be good teams. I mean, they have to play near perfect football to even have a fighting chance. And if they lose 2 games, then you're looking at a 9-win season again. And while 9 wins won them the division last year, it's not going to this year with the way the Falcons have been playing. So I'm less optimistic that they'll make the playoffs, but I at least think that they're going to go on a run down the stretch and make things interesting.
Yeah, I almost feel like in a way it's football karma for how the Bucs made the postseason the last 2 years, going 8-9 and winning the division, and then going 9-8. I hate to say it, and I know we talked a lot about, hey, they go 6-1, like if they win except for the Chargers game, they'll be in a good spot in 10 wins. I think, and this goes to the football karma, I think the Bucs have to win out and win 11 games just to get a wild card spot. Because, and you mentioned some of the divisions, Eagles Commanders, that's going to be a really fun game tonight. Yep. I'm looking forward to it, but they both have 7 wins. So I guess if you're the Bucs, you're rooting for the Commanders because they have the tiebreaker over beating. Actually, well, never mind. They beat the Commanders too. So I guess it doesn't matter either way. But, you know, you're asking these teams not to win more than 3 games down the stretch, even after this game, and one of them is going to win. I just don't see that happening. The 49ers are second place in the NFC West at 5-4. So for the Bucs, you're kind of rooting for the Rams to keep losing, the Seahawks to keep losing, and hopefully the 49ers fall. But again, they're all going to play each other, so someone has to win. And maybe even as concerning as the NFC North, yeah, the Vikings have struggled, and that was an ugly win over the Jaguars. But they're still 7-2. So once again, they have to really stub their toe at the end. And even the Packers, like the Packers' loss came early in the season against the Eagles in Brazil, which is a slip and slide type of game. And their other big loss came against the Lions. So to ask the Packers to really struggle again is gigantic. I want to take a look at the schedule this week. Obviously, the Bucs don't have a game. So Commanders, Eagles, that's kind of a wash. So Bears play the Packers. Your Bucs fans are going to be rooting for the Bears in that one. Rams, Patriots, like it's a very winnable game for the Rams. Seahawks, Niners. Yep. I guess you want the Seahawks in that one. Let's see what else we got. You're going to be rooting for the Broncos because they play the Falcons. In a weird way, I almost feel like the best path for the Bucs is still to win the division. And hopefully that the Falcons kind of collapse down the end. What do you think about that?
I mean, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And the Falcons, the fact that they lost to the Saints this past weekend, they've shown that they're beatable. And if they go on a late season collapse, I mean, it's very realistic that the Bucs could leap them by a game still. If the Bucs, let's say, win 5 or 6 games, the Falcons win 3 or 4. I mean, there's a path there. But the fact that the Falcons swept the Bucs this regular season, like the Bucs really need to go on a run to at least get in the wild card race. But the best path obviously would be to win the NFC South, get a home game in the playoffs.
And that's what made last game hurt so much, because right now they're 2 games behind the Falcons, but it's essentially 3. So if you win that game last week, you're 1 game behind and essentially 2 out. You know, the Falcons going to Denver, that's certainly not easy. Their next 3 games are tough, Adam. It's at Denver, home against the Chargers, and on the road against the Vikings. Like those games could really go either way. So in a sense, yeah, you could hope that the Falcons lose those next 3, but then you have to win those next 3 just to essentially be 1 game out or all tied up. But then they play the Raiders and the Giants. The big thing would be December 29th, my friend John's birthday. Shout out John. And Chris's birthday as well. Shout out Chris. They play the Commanders. You essentially have to be tied with the Falcons going into that game against the Commanders because the Bucs at the same time will be playing, I think the Panthers again.
Yeah, week 17.
Yeah, they'll be playing the Panthers again. And then the Saints the final week, where the Falcons go and then play after the Commanders, the Panthers, the final week of the season. So really just feels like a missed opportunity not beating the 49ers, more for their playoff chances than let alone just getting a win. So that's where it stands right now with the standings and the Bucs schedule and the Falcons schedule. Season's not over, but it's certainly in dire straits at the moment. So doom and gloom, as Hezo813 says, of course, a Pewter Report YouTube channel member says, don't want to be doom and gloom, but Bucs need to focus on learning how to win again first instead of worrying about the division and playoffs. The reason why I said doom and gloom is because Todd Bowles had mentioned that in one of his last press conferences as well. And I agree with Hezo813. Like, at this point, you can only take 1 game at a time. There's nothing more that the Bucs can do, and they don't control their own destiny. But what they do control is in the offseason, who they can add, they can cut, who they want to draft, and things of that nature. And this is still a talented team, but there are a good amount of flaws on this unit as well. So it'll be a very interesting offseason coming up for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We can talk a little bit about like in-game adjustments, but I think that ship has kind of sailed with Todd Bowles and what he likes to do and what he wants to do. But looking at the big picture for the Buccaneers, Adam, what is the biggest need for the Bucs moving ahead?
Yeah, from the player personnel side, I would say the biggest need, you and I both agree on it, would be inside linebacker. I mean, when you look at the picture next season, Lavonte David, he may or may not be in the fold. He's kind of lost a step from that elite play that Bucs fans have come to know from him. And then you look at KJ Britt, probably gone. Savasier Dennis, really good linebacker when he's healthy. That's the caveat. And the Bucs really can't rely on him to play a full 17-game season. So you look at both starters right now kind of being out of the picture. What do they do at inside linebacker? And I think that's where things get really interesting, right? Because you look at free agency, the top guys would be Dre Greenlaw, Robert Spillane, and Tyrell Dotson. Dotson was just claimed by the Dolphins. He was PFF's number 1 linebacker last year. And so with Greenlaw, the hope would be coming back from his Achilles injury, he could continue his high-end play. Spillane would be more of a KJ Britt replacement. But I think if you're the Bucs, Lavonte David retires, Britt's gone, they need to sign 1 free agent, and then they need to draft another guy, probably within the first couple rounds. And it's not the strongest class. Alabama's Jahad Campbell, Clemson's Barrett Carter. Those are probably the top guys there. But, Matt, I don't know what they do at inside linebacker, especially if David retires. That's the biggest need.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And there are a lot of people. I was trying to find some of the comments as well. Donald Jones II says defensive players in all caps. Henry Gigante, a Pewter Report YouTube channel member, says biggest need is inside linebacker, but we all know that. And yeah, that's certainly true. I agree with you, Adam. Inside linebacker is the top need for this team. But I think on top of that, we'll talk about a couple of other positions momentarily. But at least with a lot of the other positions, it's like, well, they at least have this player, and that player that, can either develop or you like this, or they just need to add a little something else. With inside linebacker, it's essentially barren. It's essentially a ghost land when it comes to inside linebacker, with the exception of Sirase Dennis, because I agree with you. I mean, if Levante David wants to come back, then I think the Bucs should certainly entertain it because it'll be for less money. And then maybe Levante becomes the guy that you platoon with the following season just because of his age and stuff like that. Because he's still as savvy as ever with reading a defense, knowing when to react and stuff. He's just a step slower, and that's just his age. It's not really his fault. But I agree, and Scott's talked about it as well. KJ Britt is done, and then you're essentially talking about JJ Russell, who I like as a player, but I don't love him as a starter. You know, I like him very much in his role as a fourth string inside linebacker. Vi Jones hasn't shown us anything yet, and that's partially because of the man on the picture there with Todd Bowles, because he doesn't trust his undrafted free agent guys. He doesn't trust his younger players, so we haven't really seen Vi Jones. But the reason why I say really that it's a ghost land is Sirase Dennis has already an injury history in 2 seasons. And I like Sirase Dennis a lot, but if he's not available, he's not providing anything to this team. He's essentially Jamel Dean without any of the good plays that Jamel Dean has brought this team. And I don't mean this to diss Sirase Dennis. Like, he's been on the show. I very much enjoy him as a person and what he's provided in interviews and things like that. He's a good player when he's available. He just seems to have a nose for the football. He seems to have an eye for the game and is able to react to certain things and to make plays, like I said before. But if he's only going to be around for 5 games, that doesn't do much for the Bucs. So you have to look at free agency. You have to look at the draft. You have to spend a lot of resources on inside linebacker, and you're not even going to know the results that you're going to get. You just mentioned the free agent class, and not really that spectacular. One of the best top linebacker free agents was a guy that just got cut last week, as you were just talking about. So that speaks to the weakness of the inside linebacker group. Now, with that said, there's a reason that inside linebackers, and I know Devin White went 5th overall, and that was a little bit of an exception, but a lot of times linebackers don't even go in the first round. They're more of 2nd round, 3rd round type of pick. So I feel like inside linebacker is a position that you can kind of find a diamond in the rough that you may not be able to as much with other positions, but there's no doubt that it's the number one biggest need for the Bucs going into next season. So with that said, what would you say is the second most important position for the Bucs?
Yeah, I do want to get to the super chat real quick from Aiden, $1.99. Thank you so much. He said, what do we do in the first round? Those linebackers aren't round 1. The 2 guys I mentioned, Jahad Campbell and Barrett Carter. Campbell's probably a 2nd round guy. Barrett Carter's probably a 3rd round guy. So you mentioned who would they target in the first round, or who would be like the biggest need going forward? And I think that question can be answered with outside linebacker, Matt. And Yaya Diaby this season, you expected him to be that number 1 guy, but he really hasn't emerged in that fashion. Only a couple sacks throughout half the season. Maybe he goes on another late season run, but he really hasn't shown that number 1 kind of quality where like defense or opposing offenses really need a game plan against him. And so I think what you do is you draft outside linebacker round 1. There's a few guys out there. Georgia's Jalen Walker, Penn State's Abdul Carter. Those are guys that are really intriguing, have a lot of traits, and could really be that number 1 guy. And so I think that is a big need, because although the defense, they get sacks from everybody, you still need that menace. And the top teams, there's a reason why they have top pass rushers. The Steelers with Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt. I mean, when you look around the league, all the teams, like even the Cowboys, their defense is still relevant because they have a game changer like Micah Parsons. And so I think the Bucs really need that going forward. There's a lot of defensive positions that they need. I think that outside of inside linebacker, that's the biggest one.
Very interesting. You make all valid points, and it's certainly not a wrong decision by any means. I actually went with a different choice there, still on the defensive side of the football. That's why I want to get to these comments real quick. And I know there's a couple of super chats as well. We will get to those super chats too. And everyone, please feel free to rank your biggest needs as well, because he's 0813 agreed with Adam, saying second biggest need is edge rusher. Andrew, I actually agree with, says 1 linebacker and 2 corner. So corner would be my pick as the second biggest need. I have outside linebacker actually as 4th. So I'll tell you what my 3rd was. it a little bit. But really, my reasoning for going with corner as the second biggest need, you have a guy right here in Zion McCollum. He's your CB1 for the future. There's no doubt about it. At outside linebacker for the Bucs, I know Yaya's not having the best season, and maybe this is just wishful thinking by me, but I still think there's something there with Yaya Diaby. I still think better days are ahead for Yaya, and this is more of a bump in a road than the consistency that we're going to see from Yaya throughout his career. And I could be wrong, but I don't know. From what I've seen, he's getting close. He still makes great plays in the run game, even better than like Joe Tryon-Shoyinka did when he wasn't making plays. So I'm still holding out hope for Yaya. And there's Chris Braswell, who you drafted in the second round. And I get it. You're totally right about like game-breaking outside linebackers making a huge difference. But at this point, if we're expecting the Bucs to go on at least a better run, we don't know about the playoffs, but they're not going to have a top 10 pick or maybe even a top 15 pick, depending on how the season plays out. Who's to say that there's still going to be that premier edge rusher that you're going to find at like 16 or 17 that you can't just, draft once again in the second round or the third round or whatever it may be. So there's still pieces there at outside linebacker that, Braswell, I still feel like should be used more than he is. Marquise Watts is on injured reserve, but they weren't using him at all. And Jose Ramirez just sitting idly by, on the bench and not getting any opportunities, even though the other guys they put in don't really do much. So I do feel like there are a couple of options where at corner, like I said, Zion McCollum, yes, there's Jamel Dean, but we also, again, have to factor in his injury history and his contract situation because Jamel is getting paid a lot of money. And if he's going to continue to be injured, I know you can't really foresee all of that. Jamel Dean would have been the guy that was gone last season if he didn't have more guaranteed money coming to him. It would have been Carlton Davis that stayed, and it would have been Jamel Dean that's gone. That's not how it worked, and you got to make all the pieces fit with the salary cap and everything like that. So that's why Carlton Davis was traded. Hey, great game, by the way. A couple of interceptions, and Pat O'Connor getting a sack for the Lions, and Devin White made a tackle for the Texans. It was bizarro world watching that Lions-Texans game. But it would have been Carlton Davis here and not Jamel Dean if the contracts were a little bit different. But I think Dean's going to be gone after this year. And then what do you really have at corner besides Zion McCollum? You have Josh Hayes, who has struggled a lot. And I'm all for player development, and maybe that can happen, but you can't feel good about it until you actually see it next season. Bryce Hall played one game, broke his leg. Hey, not his fault. Freak stuff happens. He was on a one-year deal. There's no guarantee he's going to be back. Tavier Thomas, one-year deal. Not really an outside corner from what we've seen. Great special teamer, but I don't think he's the solution. So what do they really have at corner right now? They could go the free agency route, but cornerbacks are typically pretty expensive when you want a starting corner. I know, like DJ Reed. Yeah, and older. And so DJ Reed, a guy on the Jets, I think will be maybe a sought-after guy for the Bucs because, he's older, but he's a really good starter and probably won't cost as much money because he is a little bit older. But, we'll see. So, I mean, you have to fill out not just your other starting corner, you will also have to fill out your third string and potentially fourth string unless they want to run out Tyreek Funderburg and Josh Hayes once again. I'm also curious, and if Jamel Dean comes back, the Bucs will be fine. But based on what we saw from Tyreek Funderburg, based on what we saw from Josh Hayes, why isn't Keenan Isaac getting an opportunity at corner? Is he that bad? I mean, let's remember, Keenan Isaac was a guy that had an interception in the preseason. You and I have sat down the past couple of training camps, and we've seen, and Funderburg was really good in training camp too, so obviously that doesn't tell the whole story. But Keenan Isaac continues to make plays. He gets burned as well, but sometimes you take those chances in training camp. The Bucs aren't recording interceptions. They're not taking the ball away. At this point, it's Jamel Dean's not ready for the game against the Giants. Why not try a guy that was taking the ball away a ton, whether it was the preseason or the or training camp as well? So that's, again, another adjustment that I would at least consider, even though Todd Bowles refuses to make a lot of adjustments. So that's my reasoning for going with corner over edge rusher in that sentiment. The next position I am going to talk about, and I'd love to get your thoughts about. I will tell you about it after we talk about our friends over at Celsius. Of course, Celsius is the official energy drink of pewterreport.com. We love Celsius for all its variety of flavors. It would be a lot of fun to do a Celsius energy drink draft. I wish we had as much draft picks as the Bucs do, where we could just keep taking our favorite Celsius drinks. I love the Arctic vibe. I'm also a big fan of the tropical vibe as well. Make sure you check out all their new flavors, like the sparkling watermelon lemonade as well. If you need to know where to find a Celsius energy drink, head on over to the Celsius store locator on their website. Punch in your address and tell you the closest place where you can pick one up. Could be a Walmart, Stop and Shop, health and fitness store, 7-Eleven, or your bodega.
Bodega.
And after you go to your bodega around the corner and you're like, I love Celsius. I want more. I want to get it in bulk. Well, you can get it in bulk over on Amazon with the subscribe and save. You can have it sent to your place of residence whenever you want. I recommend getting the variety pack because there's so many fantastic flavors of Celsius. And get it sent at your leisure. Just make sure you're drinking Celsius energy drinks, the official energy drink of pewterreport.com. Before I tell that position as well that I think the Bucs should go after, we have some super chats that have been waiting. And if you super chat us, we will get to it. So, starting with Bucs Basement, thank you for the $1.99 super chat. Says, biggest need, a competent head coach. Yes, we've heard a lot of people complaining about Todd Bowles. I totally understand. And the thing I keep saying is, if you're going to let Todd Bowles play it out, I know it's been bad, but let's see how he does against these, we'll just say lesser opponents or lesser offenses. Because again, I don't want to make excuses for Todd Bowles because there's been a lot of things that are correctable. I mean, the tackling's been terrible. Guys out of spots too, like just playing off. And, Bowles has said like they're not even supposed to play off. And Funderburg did it. Hayes did it. KJ Britt's been doing it since the first snap of the season. These are correctable things, but let's also remember they have gone up against Jared Goff, who they beat, Jalen Hurts, who they beat, and then quarterbacks that they lost to, Kirk Cousins twice, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. Those are some really damn good quarterbacks. And even the rookies they went up against, Spencer Rattler, all right, exception to the rule.
Yeah.
But Jaden Daniels is going to win Rookie of the Year. And it was his first start of the season, so they obviously caught him at a right time. Bo Nix, having a pretty good year. I just picked him up on fantasy football. I think
I did too, actually. Yeah.
My quarterbacks are, I had Dak, who's out for the year, and I have Trevor Lawrence, who's been out. He'll be out for the next 2 games. So I picked up Aaron Rodgers last week, and that went great. So
I've had him.
So now I'm on to Bo Nix. But anyway, so Bo Nix, the Bucs did a good job there. Well, no, actually they didn't. The Bucs did a good job of highlighting how great Bo Nix can be. So this is really what I'm trying to say is the Bucs have been kingmakers before. They're going to be on the highlight reel, Patrick Mahomes this year and Lamar Jackson. Will they continue to be kingmakers and make whoever starts for the Giants next week a star player? Whoever starts for the Panthers, will that be their 4th win in a row or 3rd in 4 weeks, stuff like that? If they don't get it done against, let's just not even say the rest of the season, the next 3 opponents that have major questions, not just on offense, but at quarterback. If they don't get it done in those next 3 weeks, then we don't even need to say, let it play out or what if, because Todd Bowles may coach the rest of the season, but he will be done if they don't win these next 3 games.
I agree. And then the what ifs would no longer be in play because he would be out the door. But when you kind of look at how the defense has played the last few weeks, like you mentioned, some of the guys, Britt, Funderburk, Hayes, they've struggled. Yeah. And with Funderburk and Hayes, you kind of alluded to it earlier, they're nothing more than really practice squad corners. And they're being thrusted into being number 2, number 3 guys. Yeah. So when you look at the defense and the fact that a lot of the production the past 4 weeks has come without having Jamel Dean, getting him back on the scene would be huge because you have McCollum and Dean. That's a big upgrade over McCollum and Funderburk, right? And you'll kind of see some of those coverage things and lapses and assignments. Hopefully those go more to the wayside. But when you look at it, like Todd Bowles, he took this week, he gave it off to the players. You can question whether that was the right or wrong thing, but it is a chance to recalibrate and for the guys to get on the same page, kind of away from the facility, take a step back mentally and physically. Just, I don't know, take the week off of football because the past few weeks have been brutal. These last second losses, overtime losses, you could kind of argue that maybe they should be in team meetings, but they turned it around last season. You could also give Bowles the benefit of the doubt that he knows what he's doing. He knows what the team needs going forward, and kind of getting that rest before facing 3 very favorable opponents. It does make sense to some level. So you can kind of argue, like down the stretch, like Bowles, like the next 3 games are the biggest games of his head coaching career, because if he doesn't do well, if the team loses all 3 games, he's gone, and he's probably not a head coach in the NFL anymore. I think he's 61 years old now. So if they win all 3 games, they go on a run, then you can kind of argue if Bowles should be back, but they would need to improve. So all that's to say that the need on head coach, it's to be determined.
Yeah, it sounds mean, but unfortunately, if Bowles gets fired from the Bucs, he will likely never be a head coach again in the NFL. Because you look at some other coaches that have gone to a couple of different places. Well, why did they get hired again? Because at some point they had success. Like Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl with the Eagles. That got him essentially the job with the Jaguars. Mike McCarthy obviously won a Super Bowl with the Packers and then eventually helped him out with getting a job to the Cowboys. Bowles has a losing career record as a coach going back to his time with the Jets. He's really only had 2 winning seasons. It was his first year with the Jets at 10-6, and his second year with the Bucs at 9-8, so just over 500 in that one. And his entire Bucs tenure, if they lose a couple games here, he'll end up with another losing record. So I don't think any team really would be like, oh, you know what, we have to give him another chance. Now, I don't know, crazier things can happen, but that's really unfortunate. A couple other things to get to. One, I see what you did there with Jamel Dean getting back into the scene. Typically, we don't make a scene, but getting back into the scene. That I like that one there. Also, here's where people will say, "Oh, what the heck with Jason Light? He set the team up to fail." I think again, it's important to reiterate. You had Jamel Dean and Zion as your top 2 corners. You had Bryce Hall ready to go as your backup. Bryce Hall isn't just injured. He's out for the year after week 1. So you immediately have to put your 4th string and your 5th string guys in these type of situations. That's not how you draw it up. Yes, injuries happen, but not season-ending injuries in the first game of the season. Not your top corner going on IR, 5 games into the season. Yes, it happens, but not at the crazy way that the Bucs had. So just wanted to address that as well. And again, that's why I have cornerback up there so important. The other super chat we got to get to. Thank you very much to Kathy Gillespie with the $4.99 super chat. Thank you so much. Says Ed McCaffrey coined us as the best 4-6 team in the league and believes that we will win the division over the Falcons. Bob Papa, too. Have me hope or hoping. I've heard that from a couple other places, too. Part of my take, which I'm a big fan of, mentioned it. I believe the Dan Patrick Show talked about it, too. I don't know, Adam. I think part of it is people's love and I would say joy of like Baker Mayfield and the way that Baker just grinds it out and keeps them in games. I think people resonate around that and kind of like almost like a magnet kind of, going into everything. People are brought into the force field of Baker Mayfield based on what he's doing. Maybe it's just me, but I think Baker's play has given a lot of optimism to, the outsiders looking in.
Yeah, especially with the fact that when you look around the league and his metrics, he's playing like a top 5 quarterback this season. And when you kind of look at it, I saw this graphic on X today. If you flipped every team's win-loss in 1-score games, the Bucs would be the number 1 seed in the NFC right now with a 7-3 record. So
jeez,
arguably they are probably the best 4-6 team in the league because they've lost so many close games to so many playoff teams, and they've like it could have gone either way. And it could be argued that maybe the Bucs should be 6-4 right now, or they should be 7-3. The fact is that the Bucs are better than a 4-6 team right now. Again, that was kind of the theme last year, and they turned it around. So it can be argued that they can do it again.
Yeah, certainly. We've seen the story before, and we know how it plays out. So we'll see if it'll be part 2 of that story for sure. One thing they got to do, and Baker's been doing a great job, but they got to get Baker Mayfield some help at wide receivers. So obviously the hope is that Mike Evans is able to come back, sometime soon, and hopefully sooner rather than later. But if we're talking big picture for the Buccaneers, so I have as my third most important position is wide receiver. Because if you look at the wide receivers, not even just for this year, but for next season, you have Mike Evans under contract. There is no guarantee that Chris Godwin is going to be back with the Buccaneers. And the fact that he has a very serious injury, I don't know how that changes things. Because on the one hand, you're going to go, oh, well, now he's got to battle back from an injury again. He's a year older. We saw how it took him some time to get back from the torn ACL. Will be different with his ankle. But on the flip side, and again, we have to remember, it just takes one team for this. One team may look at Chris Godwin and say, forget the injury. He'll be fine next season. Look what he did in his sample size of work. He was fantastic. We feel we are a wide receiver away from being a contender or winning the division, whatever the case may be. All it does is take one stupid team to over-pursue Chris Godwin and overpay for Chris Godwin. And as much as Chris loves his time in Tampa and loves living in Tampa, at some point he's got to take the money because it is just a business. So then you're stuck with a 31-year-old Mike Evans on the last year of his deal, and he could retire at any moment, especially if he doesn't get 1,000 yards this year. There's kind of less of an incentive because that's one of the biggest records that he has. And then you have Jalen McMillan, Trey Palmer, and Rakim Jarrett, essentially. Sterling Shepard's on a 1-year deal. I don't know how long he's going to be around for. McMillan I'm not giving up on, but it is dire straits right now. Trey Palmer has some splashes, but he's a 6th-round pick for a reason. I don't think he's much better than, a 4th-string wide receiver. Yeah. And I don't know. I have a little more hope in Rakim Jarrett, but he hasn't done anything yet. So if I'm the Bucs, I think you got to spend at least within the first 3 rounds another draft pick on a wide receiver, because if Godwin does come back, because there's kind of 2 ways to look at it. Mike and Chris are back next year, or just Mike is back next season. I don't know if you could pencil in Jalen McMillan to be your wide receiver 3 just yet. So either way, I think they need an upgrade at wide receiver just to keep more talent in the room. And if anything, if that pushes Jalen McMillan, fine, so be it. You want the best players, not just to play, but to play well.
Yeah, you make a great point. And I just want to say to Chris Godwin, if some team out there wants to offer him money, there's plenty of teams, right? And you can make the argument that 6 teams right now need quarterbacks. And what do you want to support quarterbacks? Weapons. So there could be a team like the Giants, like the Raiders, like the Titans. If they draft a quarterback, you can argue that maybe they go out and sign Godwin to a 1-year deal to have that proven weapon. You saw the Bears do that with getting Keenan Allen. Having that veteran wide receiver for a young quarterback is huge. And so that means some team could pry Godwin away from the Buccaneers. Well, that remains to be seen. Even if Godwin re-signs in Tampa on a 1-year deal, you have to have some sort of contingency plan, because you mentioned Mike Evans, 31, he's going to be 32, has an injury history, and that hamstring has started to flare up. And then you have Godwin with his own injury history, McMillan not really stepping up so far. I agree. And wide receiver, it was 4th on my team needs. I had cornerback number 3, but we kind of already talked about that extensively. But they do need a wide receiver. And that's why you see in these mock drafts, they have McMillan from Arizona, 1st-round wide receiver. He's an option. Luther Burden from Missouri. Even in the 2nd round, guys like Juice Wells, Trey Harris. There's guys out there that the Bucs probably should target, because they need another playmaker in the room to really elevate things. Because if the Bucs are in this situation next year and having these practice squad wide receivers, much like cornerback, you're trying to throw them out to the fire and expect them to make plays, it's just not happening. And that really dampers the offense's ability to have success. So wide receiver is definitely a need. They need another guy in that room that can really make plays.
No, for sure. And I just did a quick check on Pro Football Network, just kind of looking at the potential free agent wide receivers this year. They have Chris Godwin ranked as third. First is T. Higgins. Second is Amari Cooper, who obviously just got traded to the Bills not too long ago. Fourth, Stephon Diggs. Five, DeAndre Hopkins. Then it goes Deontay Johnson, Hollywood Brown, Keenan Allen, Elijah Moore, and Mike Williams. So the big thing is, like, Godwin and Stephon Diggs are 29. And this could change too. Like Higgins, I know didn't get the deal from the Bengals, but who knows? Like, franchise tag. Amari Cooper may end up signing with the Bills. Another one to pay attention to, and we'll see what happens with the whole team. But the Jets with Devontae Adams, they could very much end up cutting Devontae Adams if they don't keep Aaron Rodgers next season. So that's another one. But I think teams are going to see a little more of the proof in the pudding with, an older DeAndre Hopkins, or even when Julio Jones got older. I know he's not in the league anymore. Diggs is out for the year now with the ACL, so that changes a lot. But Godwin, outside of T. Higgins, might be like a top target because he's about to be 30 versus like already guys that are 32 and 33. We'll see. I don't know the wide receiver rooms of all these other teams, but nonetheless, he's going to be a hot commodity in free agency this year. And once again, because when Godwin was a free agent a couple seasons ago, it was just like him and Mike Williams who were the top options. Once again, Godwin is near the top without a true like blockbuster. Oh my God, he's hitting the market. We have to have 15 teams going after him type of wide receiver. So it'll be really interesting to see. Another thing I'm really interested to see this weekend is all the football that I can bet on, especially on Sunday, because the Bucs have a bye. That means we're not working. That means I can watch every single NFL game until my eyes bleed. So I'm very much looking forward to watching plenty of the rest of the NFL, and I'm going to be betting on those games. The best place to bet on football and all of sports is BetUS. You can sign up with the promo code PEWTER, that's PEWTER, and when you do, you will get a 125% bonus on your first 3 deposits. Not just your first, but your first 3 deposits. I haven't seen that anywhere else with gambling companies. So shout out to BetUS for that. They also have plus 10% gamblers insurance as well. They have live bets, great parlays, fun prop bets to do as well. So you can kind of look at different individual performances too. And great one-on-one customer service, quick with the payouts as well, which is super, super important when you are gambling. So get out there, start gambling, whether it's college football, the NFL, hockey's in full swing, NBA's in full swing, college basketball as well. Ton of great things to bet on. There's a huge UFC fight this weekend. It's John Jones against Stipe Miocic. Could be the last fight of really each of their careers, but John Jones specifically. So if you're a UFC fan, you can bet on that as well. And like I said, a full slate of football to get into, especially with the NFL. So sign up at BetUS using the promo code PEWTER. That's PEWTER.
Matt,
Okay,
there's also a big fight tomorrow, too, with Mike Tyson and
yes.
Oh, my God. You can bet on that, too.
Yes. Great call. The Bucs had a very funny video. They asked, like, a lot of the players who you think is going to win. And all of them said Mike Tyson, except for Jamel Dean, of course, which if you were going to guess, like, who would be the one Bucs player to not pick Mike Tyson, Jamel Dean makes a ton of sense. And there's actually a hilarious video. I thought I tweeted out. Maybe it's still in my drafts. Or maybe I tweeted. I don't know. Mike Tyson's doing an interview with, like, a 15-year-old kid, like some girl. And she asked him a question, and he like is dropping cusses all over, and he's like, "Oh, what do I care about my legacy? Like, when you die, you're just dead. Like, how am I gonna care about my legacy? Like, you're dead, you're just dust. Like, all this stuff." And like the kid's just standing there, like, "Huh, well, thanks for sharing that, whatever." And then ask something else, and he's like, I don't give an F this S, and like all this stuff. It was so funny. I cannot recommend everybody to watch. It's just Mike Tyson being dialed in. So very, very funny. So yeah, you can bet on that as well. Yeah, so thank you for that. As Q's44 says, Tyson. Where were we? Right. So our choices have varied a little bit with the specific order, but we do have in our top 5 inside linebacker in no particular order: inside linebacker, cornerback, wide receiver, outside linebacker. I should say top 4.
Yep.
Who would you have next? And we kind of go a little bit quicker with this, but what are some of the other needs you have in terms of like rankings of importance?
Yeah, so if you asked me like 2 weeks ago, I probably would have put tight end here, but I'm going to switch and go to another offensive position, and that'll be left guard. I think that left
Okay.
guard still remains kind of that last offensive line need, right? Because the Bucs drafted Tristan Wirfs, Graham Barton, Cody Mauch, Luke Gedeke, all in recent years. But there's one position where they kind of need that long-term answer, and that's left guard. And that's no offense to Ben Bredesen. He could even come back on another one-year deal next year. I think he's been solid, maybe a slight upgrade over Matt Filer and Aaron Stinney, but you still want that above average guy. And I think if you draft the right one with the other 4 guys I mentioned, you have an elite offensive line. It's already an above average offensive line. I know that was your source of hope, going ahead the rest of the way.
It was,
but if you get a left guard with that offensive line, you're cooking. And Jason Light, he's been cooking with offensive linemen. So I think getting a left guard would be huge.
I think that's a really good choice. I still went with tight end next just because I think they can still improve the rest of the tight end room outside of K-Dot and maybe get some 12 personnel going with 2 tight ends if they need it. So I actually went tight end, safety, because we got to remember Jordan Whitehead's only on a 2-year deal and he struggled last year. You're going to need a safety one way or another. You could put Tyke Smith back at safety, but what are you doing at corner? Nickel corner. Just there. So I put safety as a little bit of a need, but obviously not like the first one. And then I had guard as well. The reason why I had guard a little bit later, and it's beautiful what Tampa Bay has with a lot of guys on their rookie deals and Tristan Wirfs extended. My thought, though, was let's remember they also drafted Elijah Klein later in last year's draft. We'll see how much he can develop if he could eventually be a starter. And Bredesen's playing well, but he's not going to be like too expensive to bring him back. So you give him a pay bump for sure. But remember, you have a lot of other guys like coming off the books and things of that nature. I think you'd be able to keep Bredesen for like a 2-year deal or something like that. Keep him as like the stopgap starter. And then you continue to develop Elijah Klein or draft a guard earlier in this year's draft and then develop that player for another season or 2. So I don't disagree with left guard by any means. That's just what I had a little bit later. And then I also put in defensive tackle. Again, you got a great duo with Vita Vea and Kalijah Cansey, but Logan Hall's not really fitting the bill. He's had a nicer stretch, but again, I don't know if he's going to get a second contract with Tampa Bay, and you want to have a good rotation. They have a fair amount of 1-year contract guys like Greg Gaines. Will Golson's at the end of his career. I don't know if CJ Brewer and some of these other guys are immediate answers. So get that defensive tackle for the future. But those are pretty much all the picks I had for Bucs team needs. Is there anything else that you had on there that maybe I'm missing?
No, I think you hit it with tight end, safety, kind of mentioning the defensive line. Those would probably be my next 3 in that order. I think when you look at tight end, there are a couple of guys that are intriguing in this year's draft. Tyler Warren and Harold Fannin out of Bowling Green. Those guys could kind of be more dynamic weapons next to Cade Otton. I mean, Cade Otton in recent weeks, he's proved me wrong, Matt. He's looked to be that receiving guy.
Proved everyone wrong.
Yeah, I mean, he's really stepped up in a major way, and he's been the best tight end in football the last month. I don't think that's a stretch to say, but do you expect him to do that in the future? Do you think he's that long-term top 10 tight end in the NFL? Not sure just yet, but he's making enough strides that you can make the argument. Safety with Jordan Whitehead, another guy down the stretch. I kind of had a list of players that really need to play well down the stretch, like to really secure a future. And that would be Chris Braswell, Jalen McMillan, J.J. Russell, and Jordan Whitehead. 3 young guys and 1 veteran. Because if Whitehead continues to struggle the rest of the way, and let's say the team struggles, then you're looking at maybe a defensive overhaul with all new assistant coaches. Would they want Jordan Whitehead still in the fold? I kind of doubt that. And the last team need, what was the one you mentioned?
I said tight end, safety, guard, and defensive tackle.
Yeah, defensive tackle. And so you have Vita Vea, Elijah Cansey. Vita Vea, he's kind of getting up there in age, is still dominant as a nose
Sadly, but
tackle.
yes.
You would kind of expect Logan Hall to slide into that Will Golston role if he remains in Tampa Bay as that rotational guy. Greg Gaines is a free agent after the season. They need another young, talented player because you always want to beef up the trenches. You always want to draft guys in the front seven to really, be like big presences up the middle.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree with what you said. There isn't really any other team needs. One interesting one, though, I'd like to point out, quarterback. Backup quarterback, because Kyle Trask is a free agent. Michael Pratt,
That's
he
true.
might stick around. But I don't know. In the 4th round, getting a guy like Jackson Dart out of Mississippi, that could be fun. So
I agree. And I think you have very sound logic with all the other positions you mentioned. And it is interesting what they'll do with quarterback because, Pratt, it very much feels like, okay, he's their developmental project type of stuff. But if something happened to Baker, do you feel confident in putting him in a game next season?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know. I guess you could say the same thing about drafting a quarterback in a middle round. I wouldn't be against it because what if Baker does regress? And I don't think that's going to be the case.
No.
But what's your next move if things don't work with Baker? Is it just tank and try to get a top guy the next year, whatever the case may be, or do you have another plan? And I kind of like having another plan versus just, all right, we're going to blow everything up and just try this new quarterback. So that is certainly intriguing. That would be a lot of fun to see. Speaking of a lot of fun, if you want to have fun and have great food all at the same time and drinks, there's no better place to go to than Walk-Ons.
Yeah, so what happened out there tonight?
We struck out at home with leftovers, then we remembered walk-ons.
What effect did the situation have?
Spirit soared. Nick took on a burger. Jen obliterated her ribeye po' boy. And speaking of spirits, Laura even scored a real tasty cocktail. She needed that.
Any lessons learned today?
Yeah. Head straight to walk-ons.
Scratch-made dishes, wall-to-wall TVs, craft beers, and cocktails. Walk-ons for the win.
Yeah, shout out to Walk-Ons. They got happy hour every single day, including all day on Tuesdays. You can still go tonight. They have it Wednesday and Thursday from 3 to 6 and then 9 till close. So if you want to watch that very entertaining Eagles Commanders game, wrong team with the C, you can watch that this evening. And Friday they have it from 3 to 6, so a true blue happy hour there. You get $3 happy hour pours, some great starter foods as well, like the boneless wings. And, of course, on the weekend with college football on Saturdays and the NFL on Sundays, they have terrific game day specials like pints for a good price of $4.49 or the 22-ounce for $5.99. Some neutrals as well, and a lot of other great options. So shout out to Walk-Ons. There's 3 locations, one over in Lakeland, one in Wesley Chapel by Scott, and another in Midtown, close to Raymond James Stadium and close to where I live as well. So who knows? Maybe you'll see me. Maybe you'll see a Bucs player there from time to time because that happens. And check out our friends over at Walk-Ons. Got a couple super chats to get to. Shout out to Kyle Dugan. Dukes! Thank you for this $2.99 super chat. Says, football guys, thoughts on John Gruden to Barstool? Yeah, that was some news that came out today. Former Bucs head coach John Gruden, who was at the last Bucs game. You actually did a story on it, Adam.
Yeah.
He has a new deal signed with Barstool Sports. Now, I'm a big fan of Barstool. I thought this is going to be a great hire. Listen, if you hate John Gruden that much based on the email and everything that came out, that's totally fine. I'm not knocking you at all. You feel the way that you want to feel. If you want to forgive him and kind of move on, or I should say move on, but move forward and everything, objectively, I think this is going to be hilarious. He was already on this show, The Yak, testing out some of the guys that work there, saying whether or not he would cut him. I think he's going to have great football stories. We know what he did as a coach, but let's remember, he was the color commentary guy on Monday Night Football for a very long time. He's got that distinct voice. He's got a ton of football knowledge. He was doing his own YouTube show, which was very, very successful. So I think the off the cuff nature of Barstool, letting him kind of, be himself and not have to be like buttoned up and all this stuff is going to be fantastic. Got to give a shout out to our friend Stephen Che, who works at Barstool Sports. He's been on the podcast before, so a friend of the program. I think this is a great move. I'm excited to see all the football knowledge that John Gruden's going to bring. And I also think it's going to be very funny. He's going to be on Part of My Take tonight, live watching the Eagles Commanders game with some of the guys on Part of My Take. I think it's going to be so much fun, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed. He was on Part of My Take a few weeks ago, who knew he would parlay that into a deal with Barstool Sports. But with John Gruden, regardless of his past, the man is passionate about football, and he knows his X's and O's like better than anyone. And like watching his YouTube channel the past couple of months, his hour-long breakdowns of just one football game, you can see that passion, that energy. He's feeling nicey about something. Like you love it.
Yeah.
He's such a personality that he's going to seamlessly fit into what they do over there. And I also like the fact that it's still like putting him on the NFL map. He's in his early 60s now, and after getting fired from the Raiders, you kind of doubt if he'll be a head coach again, but this is still a way to keep him involved and keep his name relevant in the NFL. And I think after the past few years, he's kind of like he's apologized and been remorseful for his actions. He put out a statement back in 2022.
Kind of like paid the price a little bit.
Yeah, like paid the dues of that. And now you kind of see him like still thriving and getting that new role. That's exciting.
Yeah, like he deserved to get backlash for everything that he did and everything that he said. I think we also have to remember, like, that was a lawsuit going on between Daniel Snyder and the NFL. Like, it wasn't anything with Daniel Snyder, the former Washington Commanders owner.
Yeah.
And in that lawsuit with subpoenas and things they looked at, John Gruden got thrown into it. And not excusing anything that he said or anything that he did. I'm just saying, like, there's a little more context to it. So I think he's going to be great in this new role. Barstool has a football show that I think he's going to be an analyst on as well. And I think it'll be a lot of fun. So appreciate the super chat, Kyle. We were going to talk about it anyway, so you kind of just helped us get to the point. We have another super chat from Timothy Fitzgerald. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for the $2 super chat. Also, thanks to Kyle and Timothy for being Pewter Report YouTube channel members. And Timothy says, draft Sooner Stutzman. I believe that's Danny Stutzman from Oklahoma. Yep. Linebacker. He's a Florida kid and a dog. He's from Windermere, Florida. I can't say I know a ton about him. I haven't watched a lot of Oklahoma games this year because they suck now. But even bad teams have good college players. I remember I took the over in Tulane, Oklahoma earlier in the season, so I appreciate Oklahoma for that one. I'm not against it. I got to do a lot more research, but definitely appreciate the suggestion.
Yeah, and with Stutzman, he's another one of the guys. I mean, it's a weaker inside linebacker class. He's still probably like the third to fifth best linebacker there, kind of a middle round guy, and someone who's more of an athletic KJ Britt. And, he'd bring that swagger, being an Oklahoma guy. It'd be interesting to see KJ Britt trash talking Baker Mayfield earlier in the season. Stutzman and Mayfield kind of going at it. That'd be fun too.
I don't want to trash talk this. I actually want to give a ton of thank yous and praise to our Pewter Report Platinum members. Thank you to Scott Federico, Rathel Gordon, Noah Parr, Scotty J, Dave Anderson, Eric McMillan, and Zach Jarvis. Thank you all so much for your support of PewterReport.com and being a Pewter Report YouTube channel member. We really appreciate that. By the way, if you're a premier member, like we just gave a shout out to on the screen, if you're a platinum member, like we just gave a shout out to on the screen, or a premier member, we have another Pewter Insider coming up tomorrow at 1:30. The topic will be, can the Bucs finish 6-1 down the stretch? It's a lofty task, but it is possible. So we'll talk about that. And of course, answer any questions and comments that you guys may have on that show. So looking forward to that for tomorrow. Yeah, I just saw slightly breaking news. What was the Buccaneers are, it says awarded Edwards. Are they talking about Mike Edwards?
Yeah, Mike Edwards. Off waivers from the Tennessee Titans, and then they waived Keenan Isaac.
All right, so my Keenan Isaac plan is not going to come to fruition. But at the same time, where was it? I just had it before. Jeff the Champ actually asked earlier, what do y'all think about picking up Mike Edwards? He certainly has familiarity, and he is a guy that can take the ball away. So I am all for it. I feel bad for Keenan Isaac, but you know what? He's been waived and brought back and waived and brought back several times. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up on the team one more time. But I kind of like seeing a reunion with Mike Edwards. He's kind of bounced around a little bit, won a Super Bowl with the Chiefs, then started this year with the Bills, got waived, was on the Titans for like literally 2 seconds. But now he's on the Bucs. So good to have Mike Edwards back. Really great dude to talk to in the locker room. So, looking forward to seeing him and getting him back in the building. So,
Matt, the band is back together now with Antoine Winfield
Jr.,
Jordan Whitehead, and Mike Edwards.
Maybe they'll trade for Carlton Davis. Who knows?
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think they can do that. I don't think you can trade and then trade back. But
yeah,
regardless, great show. Nice to have some breaking news at the end of it. It's always fun when that happens. And, we'll be sure to talk about it more next week. So that'll do it for us this afternoon. For Adam Slavon, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks, everybody, for watching. And we'll see you next week for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Have a great weekend, everybody. Out.